All right, and then we're gonna jump right in. Oh, good. We're good. We're on. We're live. Okay. All righty. So we're back to YouTube lives for now. Um, I like that we're able to do this. That we're able to stream here on YouTube. We're gonna stream here on um, Instagram, so we can cover it. And today I wanted to talk more about fasting. So, fasting, I think, is an incredibly powerful tool, and I think a lot of people misunderstand it. And what I will say, like kind of like what I just mentioned, is first and foremost, it's a tool in the toolbox. It's certainly something you can do. And my plan is today we're going to go over like where it fits in potentially on your health journey. And it's also going to, going to go over the different types and maybe talk a little bit about like what might be right for you. Some people, I will tell you straight up, like if you're living a more standard American, standard Western life, uh, probably fasting would not be for you to start. There certainly, I think, is a base level of constitution, of general health that you need to have if you want to go through it and not feel like crap, to put to put it lightly, for a long term. So let's just kind of jump right into it. So I talk about this all the time, but I need to start with this again because, and if you guys have questions, by the way, put them in the question box because I will answer them at the end, or at least some of them at the end. I don't know if I'll get to all of them, but put them in the question box because I'll get to them at the end. Is when it comes to regeneration and reversing disease, there are five major points that there are five major things that like the body needs to do. We need to be able to assimilate nutrients. We need to be able to get rid of waste. We need to be able to grow both on a physical body level, but also at a cellular level. We need to be able to reproduce again at the species level and again at the cellular level. And we need to adapt. We need to be able to be resilient enough to survive in and thrive in whatever situation that we're in. And if we're not doing in anything that is going to increase any one of those five: assimilation of nutrients, excretion of waste, growth, reproduction, adaptation, that is getting you closer to health. I will tell you right now, fasting is going to help with at least two of those. And that's going to be the assimilation of nutrients, even though you're not eating, it will help with that. And it's going to help with the excretion of wastes. Because what happens is like if we're not assimilating nutrients properly, that's going to be an issue. If we're not eliminating properly, that's going to be an issue as well. So, you have to be able to do those things right first. And when we talk about, health in general, we have to remember that there's three major, pillars of health. And we have structural, chemical, and emotional health, right? Those are the three pillars of the triad of health that are going to account for 97 to 99% of all dis-ease. It's going to have a physical or structural component, a nutritional or chemical component, or a mental, emotional, spiritual component, or usually it's a combination of all three, or two of the three. It could be anything, any combination of those. Now, what's interesting is, you know, some form of fasting has actually been practiced pretty much since like the beginning of time. Now, if you like look at animals in nature, if they happen to get sick, and you might have experienced this, like when you're sick, do you feel like you want to eat? The answer is usually no, or it's very little. Like you're not going to be wanting to consume the amount of foods that you normally would. Fasting is actually instinctual, and it's associated with rest and energy management. Why? Because if you're sick, for example, like you're going to want to save that energy so that you can focus more on repair and healing versus digestion and absorbing food. So we don't get those same hunger cues, when we're sick. And we see this all over, the natural world. So like an intentional fast is something that I'm sure we've all experienced at one point or another, particularly like when we're sick. So it is in some ways, I think, like the ultimate healing tool. Um, but it can be used incorrectly. And this is kind of where it can be done. So, we have obviously, forced fasting, which is kind of what you experience when you're sick. There's really two main types. We have forced fasting and intentional. Forced would be what happens when you're sick. You're not feeling well. You don't want to eat. You're not getting the hunger body cues that you would normally get. Intentional fasting is intentional. Like it's the body's way. It's a tool that we can use to cleanse and restore the body. And this is a practice that I believe most people can use on their dairy products, or on their daily basis, on their dairy products. um, that's something we're going to get to in a second. Um, it becomes something that's really useful as you kind of get deeper into your health journey. It becomes a more feasible tool. So when we need to start with when, first of all, it might not be, worthwhile to try. And first of all, if you haven't, a better example of this would be if you go to my website, which is linked in my bio. You go to my about page. I have kind of the sort of like detox triangle, and you'll notice juice fasting and water fasting is at the top. It's because it's going to increase your detoxification pattern. It's going to be the most intense version. But just because something is powerful and intense might not necessarily mean it's right for you at a given time. And it also doesn't mean you're supposed to stay there forever. So there's levels. And this is where, being guided and working through it becomes really important. But is fasting right for you? So I would say let's kind of work our way up here. And I would start again, if you're in, a standard American, standard Western approach where you are consuming dairy products still, you're having things like sodas, you're having processed junk foods, you're relying on caffeine on a regular basis, smoking, more acid forming foods, you're living a sedentary lifestyle, you're not sweating or moving your body and moving your lymph every day, I would highly recommend proceeding with any type of fast with caution. If you move straight into any of the types of fasts that we're going to talk about too quickly, it can really throw you into a strong healing crisis, cleansing reaction. People will call these Herxheimer reactions to a degree. Whatever the name is you want to put on this, they are more likely to be experienced if you're not moving your body, you're consuming mucus forming, acid forming foods on a regular basis, you're relying on drugs like caffeine and alcohol regularly, you're consuming processed foods. It would serve you more to start paring those things back before jumping into a fast. Because if you jump into a fast too quickly, you're going to experience some of these reactions, most likely. And people misinterpret this as fasting not working or I felt worse. It's no, you're finally giving your body a chance to start healing and get rid of the junk that you've been putting in it for years. So, it's that concept I need to make crystal clear here is like when you get symptoms from a fast, you have to realize this is bringing up old toxic residues from acid forming foods or medications or dairy or any of these things that are going to cause mucus and inflammation and create a more acid inflammatory body. The body has to get rid of that. And the only way the body gets rid of it is when you give it a chance to. And this is where fasting comes in. So if you're going into it too quickly, you might experience a lot of this stuff come up in a very short amount of time. If you really, so I would say, like, with this in mind, like, unless something is like urgent, immediate, or like, you're on your deathbed type of thing, I would not recommend fruit juice fasting or water fasting for most people, particularly to start. There are certainly ways you can lean into it. And again, to start, I would start eliminating or minimizing the things that we already talked about: the dairy, the meats, the junk foods, the caffeine, the smoking, the refined sugars. That's where I would start. I would start with getting those things out because in and of itself, that is a sort of a fast for your body, if you will, because these are things that you were constantly consuming. So that would be where I would start. Once you start getting that stuff out, you know, there's a few different ways you can go about it. Um, you can, if you want to get an idea for what it would be like, and again, depending on where you're at, like you might want to try this. Like you can try different green juices. And greens are a bit more grounding than fruits. They're not as detoxifying as fruits. They don't have the same astringent qualities, generally speaking, or not as many. You could try a green juice fast or like a combination with like apples and greens or celery or carrots. And try, a couple quarts of that type of juice per day. Try that, for a couple days, and you'll get an idea for like where you might be at before pushing it to one of these more intense versions. So that would certainly be a big part of it. um and I would say like have a strong solid foundation before you even get to fasting. And like one of the ways that you're going to get there is by consuming largely a sizable amount of raw fruits and vegetables on a regular basis. And if you can't handle that yet, then we have to peel back another layer and figure out why. Why is it so clogged up? Maybe we need some herbal intestinal formulas to help clear some of that stuff to get it moving. Are you having bowel movements every day? Are you sweating on a regular basis? Because those are the foods that we are largely designed to be consuming. And if we have an issue with those foods, it's not the food, it is the person, it is the body. So we have to fix the body first. Um, so that's where I would start. I would recommend at least going towards more fruits and vegetables primarily for at least 1 to 3 months before getting into fasting, because it can be a lot. So I would say that. So either way, no matter how you look at fasting, like it's going to be a way for the body to manage energy, right? It's going to put more energy, divert energy that would be used for digestion and put it towards other things that are more useful. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of the foods that we talked about like end up robbing the body of energy because it actually takes energy to metabolize, say, the bread, the grains that are not going to that are going to take vitamins and minerals, for example, to break down, but also do not replace it because they are so nutrient deficient, or they'll have things like they'll be fortified with certain things. And we know that synthetic versions of vitamins just simply don't work as well. So, that's what I would say would be the minimum. Get to a place where we're having at least bowel movements once every day. We want to make sure we're sweating multiple times a week and moving our body every day. And we want to certainly make sure that we're already handling a lot of fruits and vegetables on a regular basis. Once we get to that point, now we could start talking about like the different versions of fasting and we could push it up. And I'm going to try to talk about them in a way that is going to ramp up the intensity. So the longer we go here, the more intense, the more cleansing that fast is going to be. If that makes any sense. So first thing we would do is just simply a raw food fast. Now, technically, this is oh, and we're not on Zoom today, by the way. So we're actually just on YouTube. So it's YouTube Live and we're here. Um trying something else out. So raw food fasting technically wouldn't be a fast. However, it is a huge departure from the toxic standard American diet and can actually serve, that same function. So I would take this a day at a time. I would start with raw foods. You could try this, start with 1 day, see how you feel. You can move it to 5 days. You could do it a week. You could do it 10 days. Try with all raw foods. Now, obviously, we all don't live, unfortunately, where we're supposed to, which is in tropical environments. So, this time of year in the northern hemisphere, to start with this, if it's something you wanted to do, it can include both whole raw fruits and vegetables and fruit, vegetable, and juices. Another option, if we were to go up a level from that, one way you can go would be to fast 1 day per week. So you pick a day. Like for me, usually if I pick a day, it's either a day I'm traveling or it's a Sunday. Just the way things usually work out. Does sushi count as raw food? It does, but again, part of this is not going to be raw fish. So, or you don't really want the grains in terms of rice. So you're really just focusing on fruits and vegetables. Good question though. So with that out of the way, fasting one day per week. This I think is really helpful. I would say if you're gonna pick one day a week, pick a day that works for you. On that day, I would suggest keeping it a lighter day. You make it more of a restful day. You can of course do things like yoga, or like what you can tolerate. Some people might not be at that space yet. It might just be a day where you're gonna chill out. Obviously, like, get some sun. You want to make sure you're hydrated, so water for sure. Ideally clean water that does not have fluoride. That would be a great start. um, you can try that. And part of this is an art. So like you're gonna have to gauge like where you are and what you might feel. The next step from that would be to be doing a more consistent juice fast. And this would be fruits and vegetable juices. So, you know, there are many, benefits, I think, to juicing. I think one of the biggest benefits of juicing has less to do with what's in the juice and more just that you're giving the digestive tract a break to help bring out a lot of the stuff that's been clogged and not functioning properly. Because again, our digestive tract is something that needs to be nourished and needs to be uh, treated, I think, with respect that it's just not to. It's just not for most people. Um, it's just because it needs a break, because if we're constantly putting toxic things in, drugs, antibiotics, poor food choices, really sticky acid forming foods for a long period of time, you need a break to kind of get some of that stuff out. And I think juice fasting can be really helpful for that. Again, this can be a combination of greens, vegetables, and fruits. So this is very cleansing on its own. And again, I would start with, one day. You can certainly push this longer than, one day per week, but you would have to kind of gauge where you're at and where you start feeling the cleansing reaction type symptoms. In that case, you may want to dial it back to just one day a week, or you just do raw foods. So you see how you can already take your foot on and off the gas a little bit depending on where you're at. And that's the most important part of this, is understanding that you can level up or step down depending on how you're feeling and where you're at, because that's where the individualization of this comes in. So, and there's plenty of different options. You could go with the apple, carrot, ginger. You could do cucumber and lemon. You can do apples and mint and cucumber. You can get really as creative as you want. I will say, like, some of the most popular foods for fruits and vegetable juicing, apples, lemons, cucumbers, carrots, ginger, beets, parsley, spinach, cilantro, um, grasses. So like alfalfa, wheatgrass. Um, you could do really leafy greens like arugula. That might be a little bit more spicy. Cilantro, parsley. All these are going to be great. You can mix and match as far as which ones you can do. Um, and you can start with that for sure. So I think all of those would certainly be good choices. A step up from that, when we're talking about the fruits and vegetable juicing, would be to go with all fruit fasting. So this would be ideally organic fruits. You'd pick one or two, and you would basically just have one or two per meal. Technically, this is not a true fast as far as abstaining from food, but it's going to be very cleansing. We love talking about vitamins and minerals and like these specific things in foods, but we don't talk about the alkaloids. We don't talk about the saponins. We don't talk about the astringents. One of which, and this is why fruits specifically are so cleansing. And if people jumped into just fruits quickly, this is where they'll get the ideas that it's fruits are bad, fruits are killing you, fruits are going to crush your blood sugar, all these kind of nonsensical arguments, because they are jumping from level 1, which is the standard American diet, to like level 10. And if you're not taking the steps to get there, it's going to be a rougher ride for most people. So depending on where your general health's at now, your health history, the medications you've been taking, your how active you are, you may want to slowly step up on this. And again, the first step is to start omitting the things that are causing most of the problems first. That's a big one. You could try single fruits. I personally am a big fan of watermelon, especially this time of year. They will certainly flush you out. Two very popular ones are grapes and lemons. So, grape fasting is fantastic. You could do grape juices. You could use just grapes. If you're juicing grapes, you could do some of the stems, like the smaller stems. You could get the seeds. You could use any grapes. Ideally, you would want seeded grapes. Ideally, the darker grapes tend to have more of the um, antioxidant qualities, but any grapes can work. You could do lemons as almost like a lemonade. A more people might have heard of the Master Cleanse. That's a very generic one. It's like lemon juice, maple syrup, cayenne pepper, and water. You can certainly do that, as a big part of it. That can certainly, go a long way. So, if you want to level up with that, you can go, lemons, lemons, maple syrup or honey, cayenne pepper, water, mix that, and you could kind of do that. So, watermelon would be great, grape juice, lemonade. You could pick any fruit though. It really doesn't matter for all fruit fasting. You can go to like single or mono fruits and then juices, and now you're really getting into the astringent processes here. Um, so, this is pretty high level stuff. This is not stuff that I would start most people on. This is something, again, you would take probably months to work up to kind of give a shot for a little bit of time. It's just, you have to build up. You have to crawl before you can walk. So that's an important part. And then I would say the tip of it would be water fasting. So this is certainly like if you want to put everything into overdrive and really kick into it, water fasting is the quickest way to start enhancing elimination in the body. And we already intuitively know this because this is what we do when we're sick. This is what the body does. This is what animals do, when we're sick, is we don't want to eat because we have to eliminate stuff. What happens when you're sick? Sometimes you'll get right like loose stools, diarrhea type stuff because it's actually purging, it's cleansing. So you can get out what you need to get out. And that's a big part of it. For the average person, uh, you know, you know, it it can give you energy water fasting. I've found water fasting that like especially when you start getting into multiple days, it can take a little bit out of you for like to start. The stronger you get with it, the longer you can tend to go. I don't recommend water fasting for people who are, especially in weakened states for a lot of the reasons we talk about. I would prefer to start with fruits or, juices and things of that nature because you have to level up to this. It can be a lot. So, work yourself up to this. And again, if you start feeling worse at any point during these, it is not the fruits or the vegetables killing you. It is actually the you're expressing the stuff that has been put to the side, like put on the back burner for years. Because when we take medications, when we use these things to suppress symptoms, they don't disappear. They go deeper into the tissues. So what this actually does is it brings all of that to the surface. And the faster you do that, the more intense the reactions can be. And this is why a lot of people feel like garbage. So like when they try this for the first time and they'll be like, "Oh, it doesn't work for me. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, that's garbage. Oh, it's not for me." Right? It's not for me. It's no, it is you jump too fast into it when you were not in a place where you're ready to do it. So that's I think a really important point. Now, really quick, I want to talk about like preparing for it, jumping into it, and breaking the fast. That's really important too. So, preparing for a fast, like I mentioned, like ideally you're working on mostly fruits and vegetables for a couple months working up to it. I would say working into a fast, ideally raw fruits and vegetables for at least 2 or 3 days before you start. When you break a fast, though, um, you have to kind of listen to your body and kind of see when you're at. Like some people will notice that after about 2 or 3 days, like the desire to eat starts to diminish. Um, this is usually because the digestive tract is going to start cleansing and healing. It can start before that, depending on where you're at. Um, Especially with juicing, you might notice that as well. When the hunger starts to return, like that would be a good time to resume eating. But again, everyone's a little different, and I highly recommend working with someone to guide you on this because it's really important. Um, how you break the fast though is going to depend on how long you went on it. And as a general rule of thumb, you want to break most fasts with raw fruits for and you're going to do for every 3 days of fasting, you're going to do 1 day of this because you want to ease your way back into it. You don't want to jump into heavy foods that can actually stir up some stuff that you brought up. So, you really want to slowly introduce fruits, then vegetables, then nuts and seeds, like as you go in over the next few days, depending on how long you were going for. So, that is ultimately like the step by step how to do it. It is something, like I said, that this is more of an art than a science. Everyone's a little different as far as where they start. What I will say is if you tried it before and you thought it wasn't for you, understand that like there was probably a healing crisis going on that you did not address or just didn't take into account or wasn't aware was a thing. Um, that would be an important point. So, remember your health, the road to optimal health is something that does not end. It's a journey that continues through our entire lives. Like I'm lucky, like over the past couple years, not like I mentioned this a couple days ago, like I haven't been sick in years because, in my opinion, I've been able to take a lot of these practices and incorporate them into my daily life. Now it took me years to get there, but once you start understanding what the body is actually doing and that it tries to help you, it really makes a massive difference. And I want to leave you with that before we get to some of the questions. Like, when it comes to detox and gut health and really getting this stuff right, fasting is just one of the tools at your disposal. There's plenty of ways with herbal remedies and other things you can do to get there. What I've found though, like, is the hardest thing to do is to find the time to do it. Is to how do you hold yourself accountable so that you can track what you're doing and stay consistent in the long term, because this is not something that's going to be a quick fix for most people. There's going to be cycles where you're going to go into fasting and out multiple times if you want to get to something that you've been dealing with for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Like you can't expect to do one juice cleanse for a couple days and expect 20 years of material and waste to just come out and you're like, great, I'm good. No, you have to have like some accountability. You have to have either to yourself or to someone else, and you have to have a system that you can use so that you can track what you're doing and continue to make progress over weeks and months and years. And, I talk about a lot of the tools that I use to track my own progress so that I can stay consistent, so that I can continue to reach the next goal, in a webinar, in my detox and weight loss webinar. Like that is certainly something that you can check out. If you go to the link in my bio, you could sign up for it. You click detox with me, or you click the link on the page, sign up for it. You'll get all the tools that I use to make sure that I'm staying on track so that I understand when might be a good time to fast, when might not be a good time to fast. How am I doing and how can I gauge where I'm at, where I'm feeling now so that I can upgrade it or I can bring it back to some things that we're doing in the past. And if you don't have this stuff tracked, if you're not holding yourself accountable, it's really easy to jump on the internet and find a post on Instagram that says, oh, well, this thing is killing you. And it's 3 words and it's one caption of one thing. And, one post is never going to get all that information. You have to hold yourself accountable and honest if you really want to see the improvement long term. So if you want to check that out, the links in my bio, you can get all those tools. I talk about those methods that I use to make myself a priority, how to manage time efficiently, how to hold myself accountable. These are things over years that I've seen that are the biggest um, roadblocks for people. And if it is for you, it's really worthwhile checking out. And you can check that out. The links in my bio. I'm going to answer a couple questions quickly here. So let's see what we got here. Fasting and hypothyroidism. Is it okay to fast? How long of a fast would you recommend? So again, similar concept. A lot of folks, if they have thyroid weakness, they also have adrenal weakness. I have not seen a case where that's not the case. Good English. Uh, um, so I would certainly start on those lower ends. I would also start again with the foods that I mentioned that are probably going to be the biggest issues: the refined foods, the dairies, the meats, especially the processed ones. A lot of these are going to cause, a lot of weakness. Caffeine certainly is going to do it. Alcohol is going to do it. You want to start weaning off a lot of those. If and I would start with that before pushing into a fast. So, I would start with that when it comes to thyroid or adrenals or anything like that. You have to remember, you have to get the environment cleaned up first before jumping into these things. Because if you jump into these things too quickly, it can be a pretty rough ride. All right, what's next? Oops. Next question. What's your take on taking small amounts of apple cider vinegar each morning on empty stomach? Um, Sometimes vinegar could be a little acidic, and it certainly can be helpful. I would prefer lemon. Lemon's very alkalizing. You could do lime. You could do, you could pick one of those. I would prefer lemon or lime, and you could add that to water. You could do it as a shot. You could do it, just in your water. You'd certainly get the electrolytes more so that you need, and really what dehydration is, it's in an imbalance in electrolytes more so than an actual lack of water. It can be, but again, where do electrolytes come from? Where does your structured water come from? It's raw fruits and vegetables. That's just what it is. So I would prefer lemon. I think it's a better option. Lemon or lime is a better option than vinegar. Is it possible for fasting to cause terrible brain fog? I feel like my brain is craving protein. Yes, it certainly can. Um, that is certainly a symptom, but it's part of a cleansing reaction. So, and particularly like when there's cravings for things like protein, particularly animal protein, like that is usually a sign of some sort of parasitic overgrowth. And when you start actually bringing that up, the first thing is usually with cravings, whether it's sugar or anything of that nature, the cravings usually get a little bit worse before they get better. So you're probably getting to a point where you're actually starting to initiate the healing process. You're changing that microflora a bit. And with some of that die off, you're getting some of those symptoms. So again, you could either take your foot off the gas. Maybe you don't go to, intermittent fasting. You try juice fasting. That's a little bit calmer. With greens and apples and things of that nature, you could start with that. And that would probably be a little bit easier. Good question, though. Female hormones in fasting has been said to not be good. Again, it all comes down to what's going on. If there's already a hormonal imbalance, thyroid, adrenals, sex hormones, it's going to bring those things up first. So again, this is why, this ladder system, this tier system is so much more important, because you could step up to that. If there is a female hormone imbalance, for example, you could guarantee that there's some sluggish liver going on, there's gut microbiome issues going on, there's stress. It's one of those three things, or a combination of those three. So I would address those along the way as you're transitioning away from some of that stuff. And of course, the overload of xenoestrogen type materials, from makeups, from pesticides, from conventional cleaning products to plastics, slowly getting some of that stuff cleaned out too is all going to get to that. So that would be like where I would start is, start with that stuff. And chances are, like with fasting, as far as, when it comes to female hormones and stuff, it's not that it's going to make it worse. It's that it's bringing to the surface the crap that you've been probably been holding on to for years. So the way to negate that is to go slower using some of the mechanisms that I talked about earlier. So like I said, it's really just like a ladder system. And you have to work your way up and down it depending on where you're at, how you're feeling. So all right, one more question and then I gotta go. All right. I live super clean with no chemicals in the house for 7 years, so it must be the stress. It can be. It certainly can be. And again, some of this stuff, like particularly like drug deposits and things of that nature, like certainly can play a role. And those things can come up from 10, 15, 20 years ago. So like if you've never done it before that, like it can go into that. And I would say, just start on the slower end of it, the lower end of it. Start with the green juices for a couple days. You could try a day or two with like just going whole, like just raw foods in general. Start with that. Like, can you do a whole day of just eating raw fruits and vegetables and like work your way up? So, because for a lot of people, that actually is a fast. And most people, that would be a fast. So there is an art to this, and it depends on, where you're at and how much you're to some degree willing to put up with, but also what you can tolerate. Because you can go into it slowly enough where you're not going to have a lot of symptoms. And that's probably the best way for most people, unless A, you're aware of it, and then B, willing to go through that. And it's a lot. And most people get to that point where they try it for a day or two and it's like, oh well, I felt worse. No, it's just like that. You're finally getting to some of the root, and maybe you jumped into it too fast. So uh yeah. So those are kind of some of the big things. Again, like if you want to like really learn how to hold yourself accountable, how you put all this stuff into a system that makes the most sense for you, that you can track, that you can, stick with for a long time, and really get to a point like where you can do this. So check out the webinar. The link's in my bio. I give all my steps as far as tracking, holding yourself accountable. All of that stuff is crucial because if we could talk about the one thing you're supposed to do for liver health or kidney health or all these things, but like the truth is, it's the repetition and persistence that actually gets you there. And none of this stuff is going to be 1 or 2 days. This is months, if not years, of work that takes time. So, and it starts with just getting started and not giving up. The only way you lose is by giving up or not starting. So, you have to at least get started with it. So, I hope this was helpful, this kind of little crash course on this. I could certainly dive deeper into this in future posts and talks. Um, but like as it's specific to each person, it's going to be dependent on where you're at, and you got to be honest with where you're at, and then just understanding it. So yeah, if you want to learn like how to get consistent, how to apply this stuff, and then more importantly, like how do you stay consistent for weeks and months and build goals so that you can achieve these benefits forever, check out the webinar. The link's in my bio. I will see you guys next week. Much love. Have a good one.